All right, so a quick overview of the evening. We'll start with a brief introduction. We'll introduce the exhibition as a whole, and then we're going to take a closer look at 3 specific artists. So thank you for joining us. I'm Amanda Rainey. I'm the User Experience and Learning Manager here with the GVSU Art Gallery. And if you're not familiar with the GVSU Art Gallery, we're a campus department that collects and cares for, exhibits, and fosters the interpretation of artwork across campus. If you've ever been inside a campus building, you'll know that art is everywhere at GVSU. Our collection includes more than 20,000 works of art. Oh, thanks, Nathan. Is that better? We host multiple exhibitions throughout the year here at the Haas Center for Performing Arts and in smaller untraditional spaces across campus. We visit classes, we host events, and we provide learning resources related to all of the artwork on campus. There's a lot more information on our website, so be sure to follow us on social media at GVSU Art and visit gvsu.edu/artgallery to stay connected. I'm here along with our curator of exhibitions, Joel Zwart, who will introduce himself in a moment. But first, we want to recognize our co-sponsors and supporters of this evening. This exhibition was put together with the Muskegon Museum of Art, and we've received support and promotional support from Housing and Residence Life and the Office of Multicultural Affairs. If you're joining us from the dorms, hello, welcome. We hope that this is just one of many experiences that you have with the art gallery while you're a student and that you stay connected even after you graduate. So we're all so thrilled by your interest in this exhibition. The Art of the People, Contemporary Anishinaabe Artists, which is guest curated by Jason Quigno. And it's on view here in the Haas Center for Performing Arts until tomorrow at 5 p.m. So you can still see it in person. And it'll be at the Muskegon Museum of Art through Sunday. We'd like to begin by reading a statement acknowledging the land upon which this gallery was built. The GVSU Art Gallery would like to recognize the people of the 3 fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples on whose land we are gathered. The 3 fires people are indigenous to this land, which means that this is their ancestral territory. Every university is built on stolen native land. We are guests on their land, and one way to practice right relations is to develop genuine ways to acknowledge the histories and traditions of the people who originated here first, who are still here, and who tend to the land always. As we make this land acknowledgement, we know that it is but one important first step and that there are many more we need to take to engage in the important work of social justice. We pledge to provide Indigenous artists with the platform to share their talents, artwork, and stories. We pledge to appropriately collect, exhibit, and care for Indigenous-made artwork and objects. And we pledge to create an environment where the history and traditions of artists Indigenous to this area can be recognized and celebrated. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Curator of Exhibitions, Joel Zwart.
Hey everyone, I'll step in front of the camera just to say hello. I'm going to be behind the virtual cam, so I'll be moving you around the gallery, and I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction to the exhibition to start with. I'm going to get back behind the camera here. As Amanda said, this exhibition, Art of the People, Contemporary Anishinaabe Artists, wraps up this week at both Grand Valley State University Art Gallery and the Muskegon Museum of Art. We're glad you're joining us on this virtual tour in our gallery. The exhibition came together in part because both MMA and the GVSU Art Gallery had independently decided to work towards Indigenous art exhibitions. And when we discovered that we were both working on similar projects, we decided to collaborate alongside our guest curator, Jason Quigno. And most importantly, this exhibition was an opportunity for all of us to bring to light the incredible work of contemporary Anishinaabe artists. All right, so I'm in the center of the gallery here. We'll be visiting a few different locations, but to start our tour, we're going to launch it with a poll question that we're going to have all of you respond to. And that first poll question will come up, and it is, how many contemporary Indigenous artists can you name? Is our poll not working? Yeah, if the poll's not working for you, you can always put it in the chat. Well, I think this is a really good question to begin with, as it gets to the heart of why we really wanted to host this exhibition. In the video interview with our guest curator, Jason Quigno, he references the representation of Anishinaabe artists in museums in this region. That YouTube video is available on our website and on MMA's website. He notes the representation in tribal museums and in natural history museums, but less so in art museums. There is an underrepresentation of Indigenous art and artists in art museums. And I think that's also reflected in our general knowledge of this community of artists. In the interview, Jason also referenced the desire to showcase the beauty and diversity of Anishinaabe artists and to push us towards greater acceptance of their work, which is something that we support. All right, so I'm going to move around a little bit in the gallery here, give you an overview of some of the work. We've got 8 contemporary Anishinaabe artists included in the gallery, curated by Jason Quigno, a local Anishinaabe sculptor. This includes work by Adam Avery. Adam's work is over here. Applique beadwork. This hat over here, as well as these bandolier straps on the wall. And applique beadwork in the framed piece over there on the left. Jason Wesaw over here. We'll talk a little bit more about his work. Some ceramic pieces and works on paper. Many of these artists are active on social media and have websites, so we'd encourage you to follow them or look them up. These 2 paintings by Leanna Asher. I'm going to swing around to the center of the gallery again over here. Got Jonathan Thunder in the back over there and Wally Dion to the left. Right over here, we have some work by Robin Waynee. Some really, really intricate jewelry. Shirley Brocker with some ceramic work over here. As well as this ledger drawing here on the wall. And then Kelly Church here in the center as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about Kelly. So the Anishinaabe people have inhabited the Great Lakes area of Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and sections of Canada for thousands of years. They encompass several tribes and share similar languages and customs. Native American artists can combine cultural traditions and imagery with contemporary sensibilities and themes. Their representational and abstract imagery, these artists address craft, history, identity, social justice, and popular culture. And at the GVSU Art Gallery, we've pulled out 3 important themes in their work: identity, Native American and Indigenous studies, and social justice. And these themes act as inroads to learning more about the ways in which these artists express themselves and the traditions which infuse their lives and artwork. And right now we're looking at a piece in the center by Jason Quigno. Both venues have work by Jason, our guest curator, in their exhibitions. And this piece here is from the GVSU Permanent Collection. It typically resides in our Mary Adema Pugh Library on the Allendale campus. It's entitled Tranquility 3. And Jason completed this in 2012 out of limestone. Jason's been an active artist in the community for over 20 years. He has worked in many public and private collections. And he's great to work with. And I want to read you just a little something about how Jason talks about his work. I think that reflects with this sculpture here. He says, I work in all types of stone, soapstone, alabaster, limestone, marble, basalt, and granite. I love the process of taking a raw, dense block of stone and transforming it into a balanced and harmonious object. When I create, I'm always pushing myself, my designs and the limits of the stone to bring out a fluid and balanced form and to create artwork that is graceful, delicate, and has a sense of movement. And I would just say those last three words, I can see that in the sculpture here, right? Graceful, delicate, sense of movement. Really beautiful piece. All right, so I think with that, we're gonna head over to Jonathan Thunder and we're gonna talk a little bit about his work. So I'm gonna turn it back over to my colleague, Amanda Rainey.
Thanks, Joel. I'm going to pull our slides back up. All right, so Jonathan Thunder is a member of the Red Lake Ojibwe Nation in northern Minnesota. He grew up in the Twin Cities, but lives now in Duluth. He infuses his Ojibwe perspectives with real-time contemporary experiences using a wide range of mediums. He's most well known for these large-scale contemporary paintings that we're going to take a deep dive into tonight. And he uses surreal imagery as well as animated films and installations where he addresses subject matter ranging from the loss and recovery of Indigenous sovereignty to environmental welfare, and he even combines some humorous social commentary in there. You'll see masked and animalistic characters in these surreal and abstract environments that often set the stage in these allegories that Jonathan describes as vignettes. So I want to first share with you a couple other works that Jason created in 2020. Seems he was pretty prolific throughout the quarantine. And this painting is a direct reference to that experience. It's actually on view right now at the Muskegon Museum of Art. It's titled Quarantine at Grandma's House. And in it, we see these really direct references to the pandemic. There's a variety of Indigenous personas or identities that are all presumably quarantining together. On the far right, we see this sort of politician figure with the coronavirus as the head, and he's knocking on the door. And that figure in the dark suit with the red tie is one we'll actually see in the other painting that Joel previewed for us just now. We're going to take a deep dive into that one. But first, I want to share with you a couple other pieces that Jonathan's completed over the last year. On the left here, we have Defend the Sacred, and on the right, On the Grave of the Giant. And I wanted to share these with you because they include elements that are either recurring or just very characteristic of Jonathan's work. In the painting on the left, Defend the Sacred, we see this nearly monochrome blue teal palette. And he's using this deep red color to emphasize the tears coming down the face and then the body of the sort of Bigfoot Yeti type character, and then into the water where you've got these little amphibious guys who are ready to face off. And that long, thin red strand recurs in many of his paintings. And Jonathan actually describes this symbol as a path marker, and we'll come back to that symbol again in a moment. On the right, in On the Grave of the Giant, we see two Indigenous figures in the canoe wearing masks, and they're rowing over top of this skeletal figure who I presume is the giant, or perhaps maybe simply a stand-in for ancestors or the idea of past Indigenous generations as a whole. You've got these aquatic creatures swimming underneath, and then you've got this sort of octopus type arm or tentacle that's coming up into the boat. It's got the number 3 painted on it, which is a reference to line 3. You might be more familiar with line 5 that runs through the Dakotas, but there's another oil sands pipeline that runs through northern Minnesota, and that's line 3. So Jonathan describes his paintings and the elements in them as being very much up for interpretation, but in a piece like this, I think it's safe to read into it messages about water pollution and the importance of water to Indigenous people. And again, we see that little bit of red fabric tied to the pole pushing the canoe. So next, I want us to look at the work that's in the gallery here. It's called The Doctrine of Rediscovery. And this piece is accompanied by an animated version of it. And here I wanna ask you all to take a close look and reply to this question in the chat. And the question is, what do you see? Or another way to think of this is, what's going on here? So this is a question that's often asked by docents in museums. There's no right or wrong answer. So in the chat, just type out a couple words. You could go with whole sentences, whatever works for you. And tell us, what do you see here? What's going on? Allison says dark water and reflections. The color red again from Nicole for sure. Mary says pollution, ancestor tears, very perceptive. Yeah, thank you everybody for replying in the chat. Fortunately, we actually had Jonathan here a couple weeks ago on a panel discussion with Shirley Brocker and Jason Quigno. That recording is on YouTube if you'd like to go back and watch it. And he talked specifically about this painting. And before he got to this painting, it actually came up in the conversation that the fact that a lot of younger Indigenous people have lost touch with some of those customs that would typically have been passed down from one generation to the next, like their language and religious practices, and even traditional foods and ways of cooking. In fact, Jonathan described during that panel discussion his experience as reverse engineering his Ojibwe identity through his art throughout his life. And then he went on to specifically share some information about this painting. So I'm going to share with you now a little clip from that panel discussion, and this is about 3 minutes.
It speaks to toppling monuments. The big sort of religious sculpture in the piece is kind of crumbling. Something that we've seen in 2020, the toppled monuments. So that was really interesting to see. The cans of Kamad food. That's government issued food. And one thing that we're seeing, my wife, in fact, is she's a major advocate for Indigenous food systems, and like reclaiming our diet and eating the things that, are more natural to us to make us feel 100%. And then the little baby, the sort of the little cosmonaut, Indigenous cherub, or whatever you want to call it, is that's sort of us. That's our generation. That's our generation kind of having a choice. And this elder with the red markers. That's us having a choice to choose that path, or to choose any path really. But it's just nice that we have that option now. So a lot of these are very interpretive, which is probably good that I'm here to explain them. And then one of the things that reoccurs in my artwork is these red pieces of fabric, which are like they're path markers. To me, they signify path markers to find your way. To find your way back, or find your way home, or find the best you that you can be in a country, in a system that is designed around erasing you and making you feel like if you weren't here, we wouldn't have to acknowledge some of these things that we did. So that's kind of the gist of how I approach these things. And sometimes they're more serious, but sometimes, you know, I got to go with a little bit of humor just to kind of keep my audience's attention, keep my own personal sanity. You know, I remember in college, the teacher that I paid attention to the most was the one that could make me chuckle every 5 minutes or 10 minutes throughout the lecture. Not the one that would put me to sleep. So it's kind of my approach to that.
All right, so our purpose of this evening, one of our purposes, is that we really wanted to share with you artists whose works are all really different from one another. So after taking this deep dive into Jonathan's socio-political allegories, we're going to change gears, and I'm going to pass it on to Joel to share with us basket weaver Kelly Church's work.
Okay, I'm heading over to Kelly's work right now. There's a slide up, and it's a piece by Kelly. That's we've got a poll question that we're going to ask you, and the poll question is: what material is this object made out of?
And Joel, I think because we didn't have luck with the first poll, it seemed people were able to respond, but then it wasn't showing up on my end. I think we should just ask for answers via the chat. So
all
we
right,
can
let's
give
do
you
it.
some options. Do you think this is made of paper, plastic, wood, or ribbon? Paper, plastic, wood, or ribbon? You can share in the chat.
Seriously. You are all correct. Well, that's great. We're looking at a couple of pieces by Kelly here also in one of the cases. And she is in fact a basket weaver, and her work is almost exclusively done out of wood. Black ash splints, in fact. And Kelly comes from a generational line of black ash weavers of Potawatomi heritage. She grew up in southwestern Michigan and earned a degree at the Institute of American Indian Studies and a BFA at the University of Michigan. She talks about how she actually thought she was going to become a painter, but then returned to her family heritage, devoting herself full-time to basketry that she learned from her father, Bill Church, and cousin John Pigeon. And Kelly has also talked about this, about the ways in which basket weaving in her family was just something that everyone did. It was something that they would gather together and do. And so now this is something that she's devoted herself full time to. She's also in turn taught her daughter, Cherish Parrish, and Cherish has a distinctive style in her baskets that honors women by replicating their body with the curves of her basket. So they both have very distinctive styles. And I think Kelly now is 5th generation and Cherish is 6th generation in that family. Kelly's practice preserves the traditional means of making with black ash splints, which are layers of wood split from the rings of black ash trees, while also innovating with her use of non-traditional materials, including metals, ribbon, photographs, and vinyl window blinds. An expression of her contemporary artistry, this innovation is also made necessary by the environmental devastation caused by the emerald ash borer and the seemingly inevitable extinction of the black ash tree and many species of ash. Kelly works to raise awareness for the loss of this important tree species and to carry on the tradition she was taught. So we have an example in the exhibition. We got a slide here with a video of it. To give you a more close-up look of this. And this example, Green Egg Saving Traditions, is one of Kelly's innovative works blending black ash, sweetgrass, copper, and dye together to create a work mimicking a Fabergé egg. There's also another piece in here that's of the corn. But back to the egg, she does this to show how precious the materials are in light of the devastation that's being wrought on the black ash throughout North America by the emerald ash borer. The map on the slide, you can see that in the upper right, illustrates the natural range of the black ash. Formerly abundant as of 2014, the species is threatened to be wiped out throughout this range. So 6 years ago already, its extinction was being threatened. And this is the result of the emerald ash borer that was first detected in 2002. So that in less than 20 years, we've lost almost all of our black ash trees. And I just want to read you something that Kelly says about one of her eggs. She has done a number of these eggs. Really quite beautiful. If you're familiar with Fabergé eggs, they have this very delicate, precious feel to them. And she writes, "My piece speaks about the past and the present together. The color of the Fabergé egg is green because we have this emerald ash borer that is killing all the ash trees in the United States. And the emerald ash borer is this brilliant, beautiful green, but it's so destructive." You can see both of these pieces. Her work shows the beauty of the materials and the tradition that we stand to lose. And the other work here that's in the case, it's also in the video, is a piece entitled Corn, We're All Related, and it's made from a combination of black ash, sterling silver, and dye. And it speaks to the importance of corn in sustaining people in the past and in the present all over the world. And I'm going to go over here to this next case here. We've got a slide of it too, a little closer up so that you can see it. This wonderful mask, which Kelly has made in response to the world we live in currently. It's titled Mask, Breathe in the Beauty of the Day and the Night. And you can see it's skillfully created and combines birch bark on the one side. So the left-hand side with the strawberries is actual birch bark, and velvet on the other, with quills and 24-karat seed beads. Kelly writes about this piece. This mask was made during the summer months when the strawberries were growing and the comet was visible. It reminded me that even in uncertain and dark times, beauty still abounds all around us. And then we've got another slide here we'll pull up of a couple of other works by Kelly. A hat and a basket, and similarly made from black ash. You can see these are dyed, but a little bit more utilitarian. And I think these give you an idea of the wide range of work that she produces, innovating by using contemporary materials as well as traditional materials, and doing traditional forms, but then also contemporary forms. So a really wonderful combination. And then lastly, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the process. And so I've included on this slide over here, we just pulled up. There's two images, one of which, and these are also, I should mention, are from a Michigan radio piece by Lester Graham back in 2017. So a great piece that he did with Kelly Church and her husband, Jeff Strand. And he talks to them as they're going through the process of harvesting black ash and making baskets. And here you can see Jeff pounding the ash with the back of his axe in the photo on the left. As he pounds it, it separates the growth rings. And you can see this in the other photo right over there on the right of the slide. So as he pounds it, the growth rings are compressed together. And it's only one of a few species that this happens with, which I think it's to the point of why the black ash is so important, because it's a species that you can do this with, and there's very other species that you can create these strips of bark, or not bark rather, but of the wood, the growth ring, so easily. After it's the bark, so the logs are cut, and then the bark is stripped off the log, and then it's pounded consistently all along the length. And then these growth rings are peeled off one at a time to create these strips, and the strips are trimmed and they're woven into the work we see today. And we're just going to play about a 2-minute audio clip from this interview with both Jeff and Kelly.
Let's visit another artisan of Michigan. This time we're going to Hopkins, Michigan in Allegan County. Jeff Strand is stripping the bark from a black ash tree log. He then takes out his knife and he scores the end of it in a sort of pie wedge cut.
So that the undergrowth rings have relief, so that they'll come up out of it as I'm crushing the growth rings. The axe is for crushing the fibers in between the growth rings, and when you do that, they'll release.
He pounds the log with the backside of the axe and the wood starts separating at the tree rings. It's kind of amazing. Make sure you look at the photos on the michiganradio.org website. He takes these long strips of black ash to his wife, Kelly Church, in the same way that Anishinaabe people have been doing longer than anyone really knows.
After he gets all done pounding the growth rings from end to end, he separates them for me. And then I put them in this little wooden contraption right here. It's called a splitter. So now what I'm doing is I'm scoring across the growth ring, just barely. And then I can see it's peeling apart. So I'm taking the half of it to pull this growth ring from end to end in half. So this is probably about 4 to 5 feet long, and just this is what we use for our basket weaving materials.
Let's talk about why this is important to your culture.
I belong to the Matchi-Benashuish tribe. I'm also Grand River Ottawa of Allegan County and Grand Traverse Band descent. So our people in Michigan have been making black ash baskets since before we can even remember them. We have a picture of my family in 1919 making baskets here in Allegan County, a whole bunch of adults, whole bunch of kids, some are weaving, some are pounding ash. And so when I go back from that picture, it's my great-grandmother and her family. That would be 5 generations, but my grandma always said, we made baskets before they made cameras. So we've literally been making baskets before people could document it.
Great. I think that gives you a really nice idea of the process behind Kelly's work. And I think with that, we're going to move over to Jason Wesaw.
Thanks, Joel. All right. So I want to ask another question and hopefully get some answers via the chat. I want you, as you're looking at Jason Wesaw's work, before I really tell you anything about it, I want you to just take a close look and tell me, how would you describe this to someone that can't see it? And again, you can just use a couple words. You could write a whole paragraph if you want, but in the chat, tell us, how would you describe this to someone who can't see it? I think some of the things that stand out to me are the geometry of his work, the bold colors. Nicole says, color block geometric shapes with both bright colors and neutral earth tones too. Yeah, sounds like we're on the same page. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. And we'll take a close look at Jason's work. So Jason Wesaw, let me turn the page, bear with me, is a member of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians in southwestern Michigan. He creates pieces out of ceramic, he works on paper, and he works with textiles. In the handful of interviews that I've read that Jason's given, he always mentions his role as a father of 3, and I think that that's a pretty clear indicator that the passing on of cultural traditions and values of his tribe to the next generation is an important part of who he is. So I wanted to be sure to mention that. Jason describes his work as minimalist reinterpretation that bridges traditional tribal craft and contemporary art. And as you saw, as we were panning over just now, and as you'll see in the next couple slides, His work feels really contemporary. We see vibrant color fields and geometric shapes, metallic surfaces even, and then sometimes the addition of three-dimensional elements. So really his work is mixed media, and he's got one foot both in the realm of the traditional and the contemporary. Jason's been making artwork and objects since he was very young, starting with music. He was initially drawn to the drums and percussion. And about these early interests, he says, "My interest in creating rhythms paved a path into the visual arts, always with a simplified approach to colors, symbols, and an affinity for making work that shows the touch of the maker's hand, a style rooted in craft sensibilities, like the beautiful and functional pieces made by my ancestors." We also asked Jason how tradition and his Indigenous identity inform his work, and about that he says, "It informs my creative process from the perspective of place. The land, this place my ancestors have called home for many hundreds of years, is who I am. The land has loved, informed, and uniquely shaped us into the people we are, Potawatomi, keepers of the fire, the original people of the St. Joseph River Valley." And I wanted to share with you a closer look at these works before we take a deep dive into the water blanket. That's the big piece hanging on the wall, and I'll show you that in the next slide. But I just want to point out a couple of the colors and the shapes that he uses frequently that are really, in my interpretation, references to natural elements in the world. For example, in the two works on paper on the left, that clear horizontal line that cuts across the page could be a reference to the horizon. The circles repeating in the blue color field on the top left, a reference to the sun or the moon. The blue is water, the black is night. In the piece down below, those triangles make me think of directional markers, that vibrant red pink, a color that we see very rarely in nature, but then he's stitched a feather in there, and that feather is actually from a cardinal bird. And in the pieces, the ceramic pieces on the right, I find it really interesting how he's able to successfully create really similar compositions in both two-dimensional pieces and three-dimensional pieces. So I like seeing those both together in the same place. And this is what I'd like for us to take a closer look at. The title of this piece is Umbish Wobayan. I apologize if I'm butchering that pronunciation. Water blanket is what that means. And it's a contemporary take on both the traditional handmade water blanket and the jingle dress that's part of the traditional regalia worn by Indigenous women for events. Jason provides a statement to go along with this piece. I'm going to read just little parts of it here. He says, "This piece examines the power of water and our connection to it as a tribal people of the Great Lakes. Water has the power to both heal and cause illness. It can cleanse or destroy. We're dependent upon it, yet we have grown to misunderstand our significant relationship with it." As a member of the Potawatomi band of, or the Pokagon band of Potawatomi in the St. Joseph River Valley, which is very near to Lake Michigan, Jason's keenly aware of the importance of these waterways in both the traditions of his tribe and in contemporary culture. So in his statement about this piece, he goes on to say, "It's these waterways that the Anishinaabe people have used to trap, fish, and travel upon since the beginning of time. In our traditional culture, as givers of life, Kwewek, or women, and again, sorry for my pronunciation, are the caretakers of Umbish, or water. It is our women's prayers, their songs and dances for the water that humbly ask for us, for it to be respected and kept clean for our grandchildren's grandchildren, really for everyone's future." Jason describes the materials and his process. He harvests clay from Lake Michigan, modeling it into these cone-like forms, as well as the Cuthbert snuff can lids, and they hang from the water blanket in a similar fashion to how a jingle dress dancer adorns her regalia that's used in healing dances. He says, as I created this piece, I imagined those instinctual feelings of love that each one of us has experienced as we grew in the sacred womb of water inside our mother's belly as she nurtured us into this physical world. I love that. I think about being wrapped up in a blanket and really being able to feel that warmth and that love. So in this way, this work is both a celebration of water and the Indigenous relationship with it, and also a lament for its mistreatment and the loss of Mother Earth as she existed before colonization. Just a couple closing thoughts here before we open it up to questions. During our preparations for this exhibition, we sent a questionnaire out to all of the artists. We asked them about a whole bunch of things, and one of the very last questions we asked was essentially, what would you like people to take away from this exhibition? And I think that Jason Wesaw's answer really beautifully sums up what we would like you to take away from this exhibition tonight. He says that he wants for the viewers to see a collection of work that provides a broad spectrum of styles, influences, and relevance as contemporary tribal people, that they may gain a deeper understanding of Indigenous artists' continued existence, one that is not merely surviving, but colorful and thriving. So I thank Jason Wesaw for those thoughts. The work that you've seen here tonight really ranges greatly from Jonathan Thunder's highly narrative, surreal paintings to Kelly Church's precision basket weaving to Jason's abstract representations of traditional objects and motifs. And each of these artists engage with and express their heritage in really different ways, allowing us to see how complex and multifaceted the contemporary Indigenous experience is. And in that way, their work really underscores what I think is the obvious need for more art by Indigenous artists to be in contemporary museums and galleries. So with that, we'd like to open it up to questions. And you can ask them in the chat. The way Zoom works, if you would like to turn your mic on, you have to request, or I have to click a button that allows you to be unmuted. So if you would like to unmute yourself, type it into the chat and I will unmute you. Let's see. Oh, thanks for those last few descriptions of Jason's work from Suzanne and MJ. Appreciate the participation. We'll wait just a couple minutes to see if anybody has any questions. We could always turn the gallery cam on and wheel you over to other pieces. If there's something else that you'd like to see that we didn't cover, just let us know. Got Leanna Asher's beautiful paintings here. And again, Muskegon's exhibition is open through Sunday if you'd like to see more work. I believe their hours are 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day. Double check their website to be sure. And we will be open here at the Haas Center for Performing Arts on the Allendale campus tomorrow from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. So if we don't, what was that?
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the wonderful things about Jonathan Thunder's work is that we were able to get these 2 digital works by him with the 2 accompanying paintings. So it was really serendipitous that we have both of these paintings and the digital works that go alongside them. Really shows his interest in animation. He's a fabulous animator, and it's great to have these here too.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, thanks, Allison. MJ's asking. So Allison dropped a link to the Muskegon Museum of Art version of the exhibition into the chat. Check that out. And MJ's asking, did GVSU Art connect with Muskegon Museum to share these artists' works, or did you find each artist separately or something else? Joel, I'll let you chime in on that one.
Yeah, well, we worked together and also with Jason. So Jason, as the guest curator, was really the person who did a lot of the work in part because he knows many of these artists. And so it was a collaboration between the two institutions and Jason. And Jason's just been a great resource for us in connecting us with other artists in the Indigenous community.
And we should clarify, Jason Quigno is guest curator. Jason Wesaw is a different Jason. Two Jasons. Mary says, wonderful exhibit. Appreciate this online tour. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. We've had a couple digital events throughout the last few weeks and appreciate everybody that's shown up for multiple versions as well as tonight. So there's tons of information about this exhibition online. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I'll send a questionnaire out after this just to gauge your feel for how well this went. It helps us do more and better programming in the future, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Joel, anything else you want to say?
Nope. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.